Gondwana Records Podcast.
Gondwana Records Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Gondwana Records Podcast. My name is Mary and I am so excited to sit down with Jasmine Myra, a saxophonist, composer, and band leader. Originally from Leeds, now based in London, Jasmine made her debut from Gondwana Records in 2022. After the success of her breakthrough album Horizons, she's back with another beautiful album, Rising. On this episode, Jasmine talks about how she started playing jazz and looks back on her vibrant time in Leeds with her inspiring peers.
It's easy to look back now and see how important that experience was, because it really forced me to work through it and to grow and to understand myself more. If lockdown hadn't happened, I don't know when I would have had the space and time to actually go through that process.
Positives that came out from the challenging period. We have a Q&A session at the end of the show, so please stay tuned.
So I grew up in Leeds, in a suburb called Horsforth, and as far as I know, that's where my family came from as well. I have been encouraged to do music and to get involved with instruments and to be creative from a young age. Like, even I have memories from like being 3 or 4, maybe even younger than that, and I was always being encouraged to sing or like kind of dabble with a piano or a keyboard. I was always encouraged to like paint or create and like use my imagination. So I think it's always been something that has been really like just hardwired into me, and something that I've always enjoyed as well. Like, I wasn't pushed to do it. It was something that I really wanted to do from a young age. It felt natural. My dad is a musician, he plays piano, so I think that was a big thing. Like, he really encouraged me to learn piano and to even, you know, if I wanted to start learning other instruments through school and stuff, he was always there to encourage that and to listen to music as well. He was trying to show me different genres of music that he liked and to encourage me to work out what I liked as well. There was always music on in the background or like in the car if we were travelling somewhere. I remember at my grandparents' house as well, they had a piano and would like play and we'd sing together and stuff. So I think it was always a big part of just like daily life.
And what was the first instrument did you pick up?
So aside from piano and keyboard, first instrument that I properly had like one-to-one lessons on at school was violin. Weirdly, I can't remember why I chose that, but I'd learnt violin for like 4 years while I was at primary school. That didn't click with me for some reason, even though I kept it on for so long. And then it was when I went to high school that I started saxophone lessons. And again, it was just kind of random the way I chose it. It was just on a list of different instruments that we could have lessons for. And I think I just, there was a family friend of ours played saxophone, and I'd watched him play and been to his gigs. So I think I saw it written down and I was like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I want to learn that. So yeah.
Gondwana Records Podcast.
What were you listening to? Do you remember what you liked listening?
So that'll have been when I was 14 is when I started. And I wasn't into jazz yet. I was probably listening to like something embarrassing like the Kooks. Well, I was really into like indie and like pop music. And then learning saxophone was actually like my entry into jazz because it was a jazz instrument. So I was being introduced to like sax players and being told to try and play this style of music. I never went down the classical route, I think because of my parents' taste in music. It was always like, oh, here's a load of jazz or like soul that you can listen to. And yeah, I think the first jazz that I got into was like Grover Washington. I remember the family friend saying, oh, you should listen to this album called Wine Light. And that, I listened to that and I was like, this is really cool.
Did you like learning saxophone? Did you like practicing, or how was your connection?
I think when I first started playing, my practice was playing songs that I enjoyed and that I actually like. And I think that really motivated me to keep practicing. And then after I improved a bit, I started to find it quite satisfying and I got more determined to get better and better at it. And weirdly, I've always been the sort of person that enjoys practicing the boring stuff like scales and things like that. I think it's just how my brain works, but I quite enjoy the like technical exercises and things like that. Like any other child or young person, I think it was difficult sometimes to find the motivation or like see the bigger picture to practice. I think because I enjoyed playing sax so much, that kind of kept me going with it.
And when did you pick up flute?
Flute?
Is that much later?
That was quite... I started playing flute when I was studying on the BTEC in Leeds, so this was at LCOM as well. But obviously before I did my degree there. And I started playing flute because I was figuring out what I wanted to do after. I wasn't even gonna do a degree originally. My plan was to finish my BTEC there and then maybe just try and like get gigs or just go into music without any further education. One of my tutors advised me to start trying to double on woodwind, so start learning clarinet and flute as well as sax, because then that would just open up as many possibilities and options for me.
Then you chose to attend Leeds Conservatory.
Yeah.
You were very, very active in Leeds.
I guess so. Like, the thing that was so cool about studying in Leeds was it's quite a small scene. It feels like a little bubble, so you end up knowing a lot of people, a lot of musicians, I should say, or creatives. And we were just friends. It was just me and... We had a big friendship group and everyone was doing their own thing and supporting one another, and that was really motivating. So I think it made it easy to get stuck in because we were just like all immersed in it and all together. And I think particularly the people in my year were very driven. That was inspiring. I think we all inspired each other to work harder and to keep going and to like strive for more and more, and we're learning off of each other. So I think that was one thing that was really lucky about the people who I was surrounded by. It was very motivating.
So there's an Ancient Infinity Orchestra. They're from Leeds and they're on Gondwana Records.
Yes.
And from outside, someone like me who's never been to Leeds, it looks like, oh my God, there must be like a great scene. But you said it's really small, but in Leeds, what's happening in the scene? Like, is there a lot of jam sessions or what's going on?
I can't speak for what's happening now. I think there still is. When I was there were loads of different jams, like nearly one every single night of the week that you could go to, and that was not to mention gigs that were happening. So yeah, there was a lot to get stuck in with, which was great. And like I was saying, because the scene's so small, you'd go to jam nights and just end up knowing everyone that was there. It's like all the same people. But that was great because you could even go on your own and just know that you were going to bump into someone and go to something new and be welcomed into it.
Were you like carrying your instruments and just jump on? Or?
I must admit, I was a little bit afraid of jamming. I definitely did my fair share of it, but it wasn't something that I enjoyed getting stuck in with 100% of the time. But I used to go to jams and enjoy watching them. But having said that, it wasn't because I didn't feel welcome or like I could have got up and joined in. Like, it was always a nice sort of inclusive vibe. I think that was just personally for me.
And you're playing at the Abstract Orchestra, a jazz band, and also you had own band.
Yeah.
When you're playing those bands, were there anyone that you go to? Did you have a mentor, or you were kind of like doing your thing and just trying to progress?
Definitely. So when in my second and third year at LCOM, my one-to-one tutor was called Rob Mitchell, and he's a sax player based in Leeds who runs Abstract Orchestra. And he really mentored me, and even like getting me to play in Abstract was a huge opportunity and helped me to learn a lot. And then he really guided me through starting my own band as well and helped me to get that off the ground in a lot of ways. And just generally over the years was very supportive and gave me great advice and really inspired me to keep going with it, you know, regardless of being scared or like, he was just great.
It's so nice to have someone like that.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah. Then also there was interesting information that you were working at an instrument shop.
Yeah.
How did you choose that job and how did you enjoy it?
That was also through Rob. He encouraged me to maybe get like a part-time job there. And the instrument shop was like right across the road from LCOM. Okay. And it still is. It's called All Brass and Woodwind. And I was working there like 2 days a week, I think. And this was when I think I was still on the BTEC. And yeah, they do woodwind repairs and like services. So that's mainly what I was doing, where you'd take apart like a clarinet or a saxophone and then clean it and put it back together. So that was pretty cool, learning more about the like instrument itself.
Yeah.
But I also got to meet a lot of Leeds musicians through it, which was cool as well. And I think maybe that's why Rob suggested I get a job there, because people would come in needing their sax repaired and I could just kind of chat to them.
Yeah. Who was the most famous person who came in and you were like, oh my God?
Well, weirdly, Shabaka Hutchins used to come in.
Okay.
But that was before he had his like own projects. I think it was when he was playing more with like, is it Polar Bear, I think? And he was friends with Dave, who owns the shop. So I remember seeing him quite a few times and he was just super lovely. But I didn't really know who he was. And then obviously like in years to come, I've just become like a huge fan of his.
You're like, he was in the shop.
Yeah. Yeah. I still get my sax serviced or repaired there. So whenever I'm back in Leeds, I try and go.
Was there like any moment you're like, okay, this is it, I'm gonna be a professional musician, or it was just natural?
I think I'd had the idea in my mind from when I was quite young, but I didn't know what that was gonna mean. I'm trying if I can remember rightly. Maybe I was like 12 or 13. I can see myself pursuing music somehow, but I don't know what that'll look like. Whether I'll be, you know, playing an instrument or maybe even teaching music or doing something. And then when I started playing saxophone, it became more clear that I wanted to perform, I think. That was how I saw it until the end of uni, when I'd started writing more music. And now it's kind of evolved into just wanting to keep releasing and be an artist, basically, and that's what I want my career to be.
Do you remember the first time you finished writing your own song?
Yeah, I remember well. The first song I ever wrote was like, I think when I'd used to do Saturday music school in Leeds, and we had to write a song for one of the like modules on that, and I wrote this like funky song and called it Lime Pickle for some reason, and I enjoyed writing that actually, and it felt really satisfying to have a band play something that I'd created. But then that was kind of it for years. I never even thought like, oh, I should do more of that. And it wasn't until, again, third year of uni, when we had to write some music for our final recital, and that's when I properly sat down again and tried to write. And for some reason that time it really clicked, and I got a lot more enjoyment out of the process.
Gondwana Records Podcast.
Then you made your first album and you debuted from Gondwana Records in 2022, and much of the music on the horizon was written in lockdown.
Yes, yeah.
So that is a huge achievement that you did during the lockdown. But you also talk about the struggle with mental health at that time.
Yeah.
What was your experience of the lockdown? Could you please share some of the moments you remember?
Yeah. Lockdown was a really strange time for me. And it was difficult as well because before the lockdown hit, I was fully self-employed doing music. I was doing a lot of teaching. I was running my band still, which was going like maybe 3 or 4 years before I started working with Gondwana. I was just fully self-employed, a freelance musician. So when lockdown happened, everything stopped. And that was really, really strange because, and I always say this like whenever I talk about it at gigs and stuff, a lot of musicians or creatives will probably relate to the fact that we often tie all of our self-worth into our art and like our creative projects. So then, and our identity as well, it all is just this one big mishmash. There's not a lot of separation. And so when we went into lockdown and everything stopped, it really just flipped my head, and I didn't really know who I was without my music. The other thing was going from being super busy and just having constant distractions to having nothing and just being sat in my house. There were all these like boxes in my brain that I think really needed unpacking. There's a lot of like mental health things that I've been ignoring for honestly years probably, and they all just came out, and that was really, really difficult. And it took a lot of kind of work, and I really do view it as a positive thing on the whole, and it's easy to look back now and see how important that experience was, because it really forced me to work through it and to grow and to understand myself more, and to like if lockdown hadn't happened, I don't know when I would have had the space and time to actually go through that process. And that's why I always talk about how, because Horizons is all about that, and it sounds so positive, which is sometimes confusing because mental health is a negative thing, or mental illness I should say. But I think it's positive because it coming out the other side and like going through it improved my life so much. And I think that can be applied, like a lot of people can probably relate to that. You have to go through difficult things in life and it can be a positive. And that's why the music on Horizons is so positive in general.
Amazing. Was the relationship with music changed by going through this weird and tough lockdown, or what was your relationship like with music when everything stopped and it was just you and music?
I think it became an escape without sounding too cliched, but I think writing was my escape. It gave me something to focus on, and I found it very therapeutic. And outside of writing, me and my housemates were listening to a lot of music together during lockdown, and they introduced me to a lot of new artists and things. So that was another fun side of it. Yeah, we were sharing different music with each other. The writing, and again, I don't know when I would have found the time to actually put so much effort and thought into the album if it wasn't for the lockdown. And it was obviously a horrible time, but those are the like positives that I got out of it, I think.
If you can choose one song from the Horizons album and talk about it, what would it be?
Words Unspoken is about my relationship with my gran, and she sadly passed away during the lockdown, and that was again a difficult time because she went into hospital quite unexpectedly, and it was when there were loads of restrictions and stuff, so I couldn't go and see her. She was allowed one visitor, so my mum would go and see her. And then she was in hospital for a couple of months, and again, quite unexpectedly, she passed away. We just weren't expecting it, and so I didn't get a chance to go and see her before it happened and to say things that I would have wanted to say. Like, you know, I really love you, thank you for being there for me over the years, I care about you, all this stuff. And she was kind of just gone. And I felt really, really guilty afterwards because I was like, why didn't I say? I've had my entire life to say all these things, and I obviously have said them before, but like near the end, why didn't I just say, you know, I love you, or, you know, and it really bothered me. And then I realised after thinking about it and just like grieving a little bit, I kind of realised that the reason I hadn't said it to her, said those things towards the end, was just because we didn't really say stuff like that to each other, honestly. It's not the sort of relationship that we had, and I don't know if people can relate to this, or maybe it's a bit of a northern thing as well, I don't know, or even a British thing maybe, of just like concealing our, not even emotions, I don't know, because we were emotional, but we just never said that stuff to each other. I think instead we showed our love through actions and really little things like watching the same shows that we like together on the telly or making each other cups of tea or cooking for each other. It was like a quality time thing rather than sharing our love in words. And I think when I realised that, it was a really like freeing moment, and it was kind of beautiful to realise that we didn't have to say those things. I never had to say it to her, and I didn't have to feel guilty because we both already knew it, and that's really powerful. So I wrote Words Unspoken as I was grieving her and like having all those realizations, and that's why I named it that as well.
So beautiful. Oh, you're making me cry.
Oh, no.
It's very similar to Japanese culture, because we don't really say I love you. We don't really say that actual words in Japanese.
Yeah.
So I've never really said that to my mom or dad.
Yeah.
So yeah, listening to that makes me feel like, oh, Papa, I don't need to feel guilty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Gondwana Records Podcast.
We're gonna move on to Q&A.
Yeah, cool.
We have some questions from your listeners, fans, and Gondwana followers. The first question is from Tu Vieira. Hi, how did you become a jazz girl? Why did you want to practice this style of music?
I said this earlier. I think it was the choice of instrument. A saxophone is a jazz instrument anyway, so I think naturally I gravitated towards jazz music. And it just so happened that I ended up really liking it as well, which is why I pursued it. But yeah, it is through sax, I think.
Thank you. The next question is from Tom Folk. How did you get into the Gondwana family?
So Matthew actually reached out to me a couple of years after I'd graduated, and I'd been trying to push the band myself, and it was just very DIY. And he just messaged me and asked if I was releasing any music anytime soon, and said that he'd love to, hear it. And then he ended up coming to a gig when we played in Manchester. And then from there, we decided to just start working together, or like building a relationship, I guess, through me writing music, and then he would listen to it, and we kind of just would go back and forth. And then after a year of doing that, it led to the album being produced. And then, yeah, that's when we decided to sign and release it, and it went from there.
Did you know the label before?
Yeah, weirdly, I don't know if I can't even remember if I've told Matthew this. This is really weird. So I was aware of Gondwana, and that was because of Noya Rao, who are a Leeds band. And I knew that I wanted to get signed to Gondwana, and this was like a couple of years before it happened. But my plan was to make an album and then share it and hope that they liked it. I sometimes do that. I don't know if anyone's heard of like law of attraction. It's this idea that anything you put out into the universe will be like attracted back to you, and it encourages you to like have a really clear vision of what you want and then put that out, and then it'll eventually come back to you. So I'd like written down a 5-year plan of things that I wanted to happen, and on the list was get signed to Gondwana. And I'd literally, a week after writing that list, Matthew messaged me on Facebook or something. How weird is that?
That is weird. I mean, yeah, sometimes, universe is like, giving you some magic.
But I think I was interested in working with Gondwana because of the artists that were signed. I could really see my music sort of working well with the other artists, and yeah, the label in general.
Amazing. That's very nice to hear. The next question comes from, this is Laxel. Do you get more fulfillment from composing or playing live?
That's a good question. That's a hard question. I don't think I could say. I don't think there is necessarily one that gives me more, but I think they just fulfill me in different ways. Like, writing music fulfills my creativity and allows me to express that, which I think is really important. But then performing really allows me to connect with listeners, which I really get a lot out of getting to perform the music and then see how people react to it, and if it's a positive reaction, or getting to chat with them after. Really, I find that really fulfilling. I don't think I could get fulfillment from one without the other, if that makes sense.
So we're gonna move on to the next question. Next question comes from Enrique MP. Have you ever listened to Latin rhythms, music genre like salsa, boogaloo, and cumbia in the past?
Yes, yeah, I have. I love Latin music, and I love cumbia as well. I used to play in a salsa band actually when I was 16 or 17 maybe. But yeah, it's a genre that I don't know a lot about, to be honest, or I don't know a lot of specific artists or albums, but it's a type of music that I always enjoy listening to.
Okay, the last question for this episode comes from Wats and Tats. What would you advise to a sax beginner 1 month of playing? How would you achieve such a relaxed and comfy perfection in playing as you have?
This, like I said earlier, when I first started learning, play songs that you enjoy, or play music that you enjoy playing. I think when you're first starting, don't see it as practice. Just get really comfortable on the instrument and with the notes, and do that through tunes that you actually care about learning to play. And that could be through, whether you know how to read music or you're just using your ear to work out the melody. Start there, and then when you feel more comfortable, and it starts to become more second nature, then maybe start doing some technical exercises like scales, or long notes are excellent when you first start, because that'll really help build up a nice tone, because I think that's a very hard thing when you're starting saxophone. It just doesn't sound nice. You have to really work to make it sound good, and long notes will do that. And always practice with a metronome when you're doing scales or long notes as well, because that'll just give you a good natural sense of time as well. So yeah,
that's the end of the first episode with you. So thank you so much, and we're gonna continue talking about the new album Rising.
Nice, thank you.
Gondwana Records Podcast.
Coming up next in episode 10, we continue our conversation with Jasmine Myra, and she shares the creative process of her new album, Rising. Thank you for listening, and see you on the other side.